Hello everyone and welcome back to another interactive tutorial overview. In this video I'm reviewing this boat tutorial, which is a really good starter for box modeling. It teaches all of the basics you need to know. For those who have watched more of my advanced tutorials, you probably would know everything that I teach in this. However, at the end I'm going to show actually something that's not a part of the tutorial to show some tips. Over here, the first thing you see over here is when we create a tutorial, it automatically names it. You can rename it later after finishing the tutorial, but this is the name of the tutorial. So actually, just an interesting thing, I haven't explained this before. The name of the tutorial is boat, so this will be named, but because I have already used one tutorial, so I already have a name boat, it will add some other, I guess, random numbers, something to my project. But nevertheless, to get started over here, this tutorial is a beginner and the designers also added descriptions. So these things you will always see, the action details, and action type. This is actually generated by SelfCAD's program automatically once you record the tutorial from the record tutorial section over here. But the description is something that is manually added, and this could be very helpful, especially for these beginner type tutorials. Okay, so to get started, it flashes over here to create a cube, and I'm entering the values that is asking at 200 by 50. And then it changes the segments to 2, the width segments, which is added over here, split in the middle, and then the same thing is the depth segments to 2, so it adds a split over here. So basically it's divided only in 2 directions. At the height, there is only 1 segment. And this is basically the beginning idea of box modeling. We create a single box, and then we start adjusting the values based on what we need, and then we further adjust it with other tools. So now if you see over here, this basically I cannot see anything of the segments because the default will set it into the solid mode. So we're going to switch to the solid plus wireframe so we see the details over here. And we jump right into the idea of what you need to start modifying. So at this point we have a simple cube, although it's a different shape than a cube because we changed the height and width and depth, and it has some segments. But now we're going to start modifying it. So we turn on the polygon selection, which allows selecting a complete polygon. In this case we have 2 faces, but they are all flat, so they are simple polygons. So select both of these faces together as a polygon, and I need to rotate the scene. This is important to note when you do tutorials, that the rotation, which is managed from here, the camera on the left side, or you can just click on the grid to rotate, is not part of the tutorial. The rotation is not included, so you have to automatically, yourself find out where the rotation is, where the highlights is, where you need to select, and if you don't know, you have to rotate the scene if you don't see it. Okay, so now what we're going to do over here, we're going to extrude that, which is basically adding another segment. Now the idea, you may ask, why didn't I make this shape bigger to begin with? And now I'm finalizing it. So why didn't I make the shape to begin with bigger and add another segment? And the answer is because of symmetry. You could have done this and add more segments. Instead of having only 2 segments, we have now 4 segments. We could have made it in 4 segments. But if you would have done it that way, you would just need and later to scale this down because these are not the same size. The segments you add in the cube are always the same size. This is a different size. So it's actually just 2 ways to do something like this. You can just create them bigger and then scale it down, or the way it's done now, where you just later extrude. Now next thing is, once we have done what we had to do, we have to deselect, which highlights it in a red color. And I can click on this to deselect, something like this, or you can just click on the grid, which will deselect automatically everything. Once it's deselected, we have the basic shape is done, how we want it, and now we're going to start modifying these. So we go on to edge selection, and we select one center edge from here, and one center edge from the other side. Now if you have 2 selected, this is important to note how scale is working. If you have just one edge selected, you can only scale it in the direction of the height. You can make it bigger and smaller height, but there's no depth to it, there's no way to scale. But if you have 2 selected, you can scale depth. Now you will not scale the thickness of this because this edge has no thickness, but you will scale the distance between these because that's basically the thickness between 2. And that's just common sense how these transformations work. In this case, the original size, as you can see, is 300. We're going to change it to 400, which automatically already starts giving me this shape. Now it asks me to deselect this. It colors it a red color to deselect. I'm just going to click on the grid, which deselected both sides. And now it wants me to select the others, so it highlights it green. So I have these 3 edges. I can click on each of them to select, or I can use marquee selection. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag here marquee on top of all 3, and they're all selected. Now it sets the Z to 125, which gives it automatically, kind of widens it, and it wants me to deselect only these. So I'm going to deselect this, because it's going to scale the center edge even more. So we all do the same flow over and over, where we use a scale to change a position. Actually, when you think about changing position, normally you think about moving, and that's true. But in this case, because we have two opposite directions, so it's basically moving it away in both sides by just adding the distance between them, which is the size of between them. And now it asks me to deselect this. So again, I'll click on the grid, simply deselect both sides. And now we move on. We already had polygon selection, edge selection. Now we move on to vertex selection. So now it asks me, before making a selection, it actually asks me to change the tool. So I'm going to move to the next tool, to the move tool. And now it asks me, look how much it asks me to highlight. All of these vertices needs to be highlighted. So we have a list of quite a lot of vertices. I think I can go zoom in like this and select this entire section here and this entire section here, because the center, it selects basically the entire bottom except from the center vertices. And now it sets that height to 8, so which is basically moving it up. As you can see, it starts giving it a little bit of an angle, and then it wants me to deselect something. So I'll be very honest, it's very hard for me to see the vertices. I'm not sure, the color needs to be red, but somehow these vertices colors over here gives me some issues. So I'm just going to use the next, which will automatically deselect it for me. So it's deselected, and now it wants me to move it, the remaining selection, to 15, and now it wants me to deselect. I'll do again, I'll click on next because it's hard for me to see, and then I'll click the Y to 25. Okay, so now what we are done, you can see we start shaping it something like this, and now it goes back to the edge mode because it wants to select these two edges. So instead of selecting all of these vertices, basically made edge mode selected easier, all of this, and it makes Y to -20. So until now we moved everything up, now we move it down, which is kind of basically, yeah, it gave it like this look. Push this down, and we're finishing with this. So you can see now actually I've still selected the edges, but if I'll go to polygon mode, this is being deselected, and I've explained this in many videos before. If you go up the ladder, it will deselect. If you go down, it will keep selection. So over here, what I have over here, it asks me to select the top. So we have the basic shape outline. Now we're going to create the inner and cut them in. So how do I cut this in? The first thing is we're going to do is we're going to make an inset and set it to 15, which basically gives it like kind of, if you think about it, the wall thickness, what we want from the strip to have, the wall thickness. And we're finalizing it. Now what we're going to do is we need to make it cut into it. So we're going to go extrusion and make a negative extrusion, -40, which in this case will basically cut it in. The problem here is that this ship has an angle, so the bottom is shorter than the top, and you can see it over here also, it sticks out from the other side. This, by the way, the idea is sticking out from the other side. This is called self-intersection, so it intersects the mesh itself, and besides the fact that this is not nice looking, that's not the desire, what we need for the design, this will also make the object non-manifold because they self-intersect. So to solve this, what we're going to do here is we're going to add a transformation, but instead of finalizing it and later taking this and scaling it, in the extrusion tool itself, you can use adding options and you can add a scale to it. And what we're going to do, we're simply going to scale it down, make it smaller on the X, -40, and then we're going to scale it down on the Z, -25. And you don't see these things, don't update live, only when you finalize it, so you still don't see the changes. But once you finalize it, you see it's finalized, and this is perfect. Now I can click on this to deselect, or again click on the grid, doesn't matter. But now we have the basic layout of the ship. And now we'll go again to edge selection. We want to add some styling to it, make it better. So now we're going to use a more advanced selection. So I select edges, but I go in the advanced settings. And in the advanced settings, we turn on select all regions. I'm sorry, so I thought this is the next step. Okay, so what we want to do, we actually want to select all edges here, all of the edges. So there is an option here actually to select all. Yeah, there's an option in the edit menu to select all, but the designer is using it from this advanced settings where there's also an option select all. So we select all edges over here. You can see everything is selected. And now what we're going to use is the chamfer tool. Now a chamfer tool could be used to kind of chamfer and add some smoothness, kind of bevel edges, or it could be used in the same way now to add everything, so all of these edges are getting wider. So you'll see if I add a intensity of 3, what happened over here is we have these flat sections across each of the edges. which gives it the style that we wanted to do, and we're finalizing it. Okay, now we go again to polygon selection, and we have to select the highlighted. So what is it? It's just the bottom part and plus going up over here. So we need to select this, and I'm going to go here. I want to show you here a trick idea of my key selection. Now my key selection could be moved from left to right, and it could be right, left to right or right to left. So if I'm going to this direction, left to right, it will select only what is completely inside. Now if you see this direction, none of the faces are completely inside except what needs to be selected. So this wasn't completely inside, it didn't select. So I can make a wide selection. Let's take a look. I can do something like this, and all of these faces that I need to select are completely inside. None of the other faces are completely inside, so it selects everything. I can do the same thing over here, and here's just one face I can do it, but you see this would actually it wasn't completely inside, so it didn't work. And if I do over here, so it's better for me to click to select. So this is all selected. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do extrusion. So we take these faces and we extrude them, and I'm going to add also an advanced option to scale it down, up or down, I don't remember, let's see. It asks me, scale down the Z by -5 is -5, and then we confirm it. So what we got over here is we added this kind of thing over here, and now it asks me to go to advanced settings again, and before we do something it asks me to deselect this. I'm just going to click on the grid to deselect everything, and now it asks me to select all of these highlighted faces. So this is simple because it's a polygon. We have a lot of faces here, but they're all flat, so I can select them all at once. What we left here is only a face here, which is no longer flat. That's selected separately, and the same thing over here in this direction over here, and that's it. So these were simple to select, but now we have faces here that are beveled, which are an angle, all of this. It's not so easy to select them, so it's going to use the advanced setting for tolerance. So we increase the tolerance to 2, so it will select even things that are a little bit at an angle. It's not going to select all at once. I have to just click a few times to go through the like 4 clicks or so to go over. Depends where you click, how many clicks you have to do, but this did the job. You see, it's moved. Now we're going to over here, we're going to go to extrusion. So we're basically rounding this, modifying this piece. So we're extruding this to 2, and we're going to advanced settings and adding over here, let's say another scale, and X to +10 and Z to -10. Okay, Z to 10, not minus, I'm sorry. You see, this is still green. It told me that I didn't satisfy it. The highlight was still highlighted, which is good. And now you complete it. Okay, so now it asks me again to go to the advanced settings, and it asks me now to select these, the bottom of it. So we've added this. Right now you can see before these were actually flat. After the extrusion and scaling, we now have this bottom part that is selected, and it actually selected everything. Looks like just 2 clicks. And now it asks me to go to -2. So it wants to select a more delicate region, and 2 would be too much. So if I select the 2, you can see I'll have the same thing here, that I have to make a few clicks to select everything that needs to be selected, and it selects from the bottom piece and from the top piece. So it selects all of these, and I'm left here also quite a lot. So I have to select quite a lot here, but you can see, you can imagine if you need to pick individual faces. Even now I have to click a few clicks, but it's much less than picking faces, because, or even picking individual polygons, because they are rounded. So the tolerance allows me to select just this with just a few clicks. Okay, so basically this is done. Now I want to make more selection, but without the tolerance. So I make a tolerance 0, and now I need to pick things that I need to select separately, I guess, that shouldn't select remaining. So without a tolerance, just selecting these, and I guess the same thing, they're symmetrical, so same thing in the other side. I click here, and then let's click on these. Okay, so now we have to exit out, and this is simply coloring it. So it's going to select a color, and now we want to color the remaining. So instead of selecting and deselecting, we use the feature called inverse selection that basically selected the inverse, as the name suggests, and now we're going to give this a different color. So these colors are actually quite similar. It looks like, and then deselect. It looks like almost like a shadow of the others, a darker color of the same. And now what we're going to do here is we have the shape done. We're just going to add 2 pieces over here. And this is where I'm going to show you later how it could be done. So because right now we are done with box modeling techniques. If you think about the way this is done, this is a typical low poly model. We have only 289 faces, a relatively nice looking ship. And even if you want to add smoothness to it, you can later go to the round objects and around them. A lot of people will have a simple version and then a more dense version using round object will have more details. And this is perfect, a perfect low poly model. But now for adding details, it's going to use different techniques, Boolean based modeling. So it's going to add another shape, and I'll show you a different way how to do it later. But this is the most simplest way that beginners definitely for sure would use. So we're going to add here another shape, and I'm adding we're going to position it. So we make something that is 30 by 4, a very tiny cube. And then we're going to add position to 60 on the X and the Y 55. So this is basically here the shape that we have done, and we're finalizing it. Now once this is finalized, we're going to first make a copy. We need to have 2 of these pieces. So we're going to go to copy offset instead of a basic copy and then move it. We're going to use the copy offset tool that allows us to add transformations along while it makes the copies. So we make minus 120, move it over to 120 and make a copy, and you see we have this copy. Okay, so now what it's going to do, it's simply going to group them together. You can go from here or Control G, and this is basically grouped. This is just to make it easier, and it's not really a big deal, but if you have a lot of shapes that are not connected to each other, it's always good to group. I've explained this in other tutorials more in depth, but for now what we're going to do here is just color that, and now we're going to combine them. So if you take a look what we have over here combined, we have only 301 polygons in total. And now we're going to combine them. Look what's going to happen. This is all beautiful quads. As you can see, they're all quads, and it's really nice. Once we're going to combine them, look what happened. We ended up 644 instead of 301, 644 polygons, because everything got converted to triangles, and it needed to be making cuts. So this needs to be combined inside. And look how these cuts are done. This is really not the nicest deal. Now if you don't care about nice designs, that's fine. You can just turn it the way we're going to do now, turn it on to solid, and you no longer see it. You no longer need to modify anything, and the ship looks nice and still relatively low poly, so who cares? But if you do care, you want to keep it nice, and a lot of people, if you design certain industries, they need you to keep everything nice and quads. So I want to show you how you can actually solve this problem. So the problem here is that we're doing box modeling that is designed to keep very nice quads and low polys, but then you have to add even a simple piece like this, and you don't have a way to add them without Boolean operations. So I actually want to show you that you do have a way. So I'm going to undo this. So now we're back to the original shape before combining it, and I'm going to deselect the group so I can play only with the ship. And I'm going to go to Edit Details. So in Modify, there's a tool called Edit Details. In Edit Details, there's an option, Automatic Loop Finding. So the idea of loops is the way we use loop selection. This tutorial didn't show it, but I have many tutorials that I review that uses intensively the loop selection. Here, I'm going to do here is an option to add loops. So look over here what's happening. I'm going to drag down and simply create a loop over here. So this creates a cut over here, and I'm going to go down, make another cut. Now if you remember, we had this cube size was 4, so I'm going to adjust the size to be exactly 4. Now I don't remember its exact position. Obviously if you know the exact position, I can calculate the first one, but at least the height now would be exactly 4. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a loop the other direction. Now here I want to show something. If you do these loops, it jumps between, it needs to know where you go, from up to down, this loop or this loop. So if you want to focus on something and do it, right now I'm not clicking anything, I'm just hovering and moving, and it finds it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to hold on my left mouse, so it stops jumping and it focuses on this one. Now I know this is interesting because this has been positioned symmetrically, exactly the size over here in the center, and when you see the green line, that means it finds the center. So it's the center between these faces, so I know I'm positioning it exactly the other side. Over here I don't know where I'm positioning it, but I know the size was 30. So I'm positioning it by 30. So I know I have here exact cut. The only thing I didn't know is the position, the height, because I just didn't know. I didn't pay attention to exact size, position. But nevertheless, I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to hold down, and I'm going to move until it clicks, the green, and then let it go, and then make the next loop over here and adjust the size to 30, to be exactly 30. Okay, so now what we have done here, we enter the cut, and I complete it. So we have an exact cut that replicates this. Now I've increased the size already to 457 faces instead of 301, and this is because this cut goes through all the way. So every face has been increased, but nevertheless this is still beautiful quads. And if you increase a little bit in quads, that's not a big deal. It's still really nice and still relatively low, but still nice. Okay, so now here's the interesting part. I'm going to isolate this so I can see these faces. And I'm gonna select these faces that I've just added, that we focused on adding. These faces, I'll do the same the other side around. So we select this face and select this face. And let's go to delete them. Simply gonna click delete. I just wanna verify, make sure I click the right ones. I'm gonna activate this tool again to see it. Yes, you can see I did the correct face selections. And now I'm going to isolate this again. Okay, so now what I need to do here is I've deleted these faces. I need to create a bridge between them. Now in some cases you can simply actually, instead of deleting faces, you can just extrude them and then connect them. But this walls over here, these faces are in an angle, and it will be difficult to do it. It's not impossible, it's actually relatively easy, but the solution I'm going to do now here is a better solution here, how to do it. So I'm actually going to draw in these faces. Now SelfCAD has a tool that is called fill polygons, but at this point, if you use fill polygons, we'll just fill back in the faces. So because it's missing some details. So I'm going to go again to the edit details tool. And now instead of add, what we did before, and drag, instead of the drag feature, I'm going to go to the option to draw. I want to draw something. And instead of an edge, I'm going to go to faces. I actually want to draw in a face. And what I want to do here is I'm going to click on the bottom face over here, this vertex. And it gives me these guides. Over here I don't actually need it, I can turn off the guides. But it's actually, where's the option turn off the guides? Should be an option here. I'm not sure if it's not here or just not in the tutorial available. Oh, okay, I think it's over here. I can remove the guides. Yes, if I stop the snapping, I can remove the guides. So and then I'm clicking here on this one. And let's see. And now I'm clicking over here. And now clicking here. And going back here, and we have it closed. Okay, so what just happened, let me explain the next one. So I have to draw in a face. It doesn't matter if I click here and click here, or I'm going to go first from here till here. So the guides actually is helpful, so it shows you where you are. But I'm clicking here. Without the guides, actually don't see what happens. But if you see, the path cannot be triangulated. Red means cannot be triangulated. Once I go to over here, the yellow color shows me that is not closed. That is a proper path, but it's not closed yet. Then I move here, the same thing. And now I need to close it, completely close it, and I get green, which is filled. Now this actually, what I need to do here is if you have 4 vertices, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th click to go back to original. This is actually something that SelfCAD is updating, that it will automatically detect this and it will not need to retrace the last step. The reason it's done now this way, why it's a little bit tricky, because you can draw something that is called endgons, which is basically a lot of faces. You can draw this entire thing as one face and have multiple clicks. So, but yeah, so that's something more difficult to explain another time. Okay, so now what we're missing here is the side faces. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it. The first one I'm going to show is clicking actually and drawing in this side face. So I'm going to do something like this, and here, and as I said, for now I still have to trace it back and close it. And then I'm leaving open the other side, and I'm going to show you later I can use fill polygon to close it, so there is no need to do it this way. So I'm doing it like this, and I'm drawing in the bottom. And the reason I do first the bottom is just practical, because otherwise it will be hard to see what's happening. So now I draw this one, and this one. In this case I don't really need the guides just to see what's happening, but other than that I don't need it because I click on vertices. But the guides could be used to click on the guides and find places. Sometimes when you draw kind of in thin air, this is when you really need the guides. Okay, so now I'm going to finalize this. I'm done with this. And the remaining, now I'm going to use fill polygons. So I'm going to go to fill polygons, and this basically fills it in. It closed it over here also, and it closed it over here, and the other side it closed everything. And look what we have over here. We have a beautiful design, everything quads nicely, and we have a total of 461 instead of 640 something that was before. But most importantly, this is really nice quads and so on. And as a professional designer, if you give out something like this, this is exactly considered a really perfect low poly model. Now here this was simple because I created basic cubes, simple drawing. What if you need to have a more complex shape? The reality is that in some complex shapes, inevitably you'll have to use a stitch and scoop solution because it's too complex. But a lot of times you can just draw a connection, delete from both shapes, and merge them together, and then draw the connections the way I've done it now and connect them manually. Obviously, everything depends what it is, and for basic models, this may be a better approach. For more complex designs and organic shapes, probably stitch and scoop is still the best idea. Okay, I hope you've learned something new from this, and please let me know in the comments if you want me to show anything else, and if you have any other questions. Until next time, bye.